So where can pavers be used? Where have they been used? These are some project examples. I can see what Eric says now. Just kind of skip through. Green alleyways in Chicago. This could be any residence here in Pittsburgh where we have pervious restrictions. Oftentimes it can be used in a driveway or in a backyard application to achieve those pervious restriction guidelines. This was a renovation of a library in Chicago, and rather than putting money into the maintenance for asphalt, they saw the long-term vision of using pavers and the 25-year plan, and ultimately changed it out while they're doing that renovation to permeable pavers. Permeable pavers don't have to be limited to parking lot spaces. Oftentimes that's where efficiency in mechanical installation leads us, but they can certainly be used for functional areas in park spaces. East Liberty Presbyterian Church here in Pittsburgh. This was installed just before Christmas of last year. This is at East End Gateway Mall in Ohio. There's over 3,000 square feet of pavers there. This is in Upper Michigan. Again, bringing in the concept of heavy vehicular load, snow plow, amount of snow, etc. This is actually at one of our Unilock plants in Ontario. And you can think about the raw materials coming in and the finished product moving out. This is at City Field in New York. Buckingham Fountain in Chicago, different applications. This is a roadway in Chicago that was installed in 2007, same roadway in the winter. So just kind of addressing and setting up the fact that they can be snowplowed. Another concept altogether is using a standard paver that doesn't have the enlarged spacers on the side and actually using a plastic insert. This is at Parkway Center here in Pittsburgh, and this is a standard product that we make, but they utilize the permeable spacer to achieve that wider joint. And then from there on, it's the same installation. The aggregate below, the aggregate in the joint filler, etc. I think this is the biggest concept that I was trying to mention by using Unilock as a product. You're not limited by size, shape, color, etc. We have a multitude of different options. This entire installation is a permeable installation. I'm going to try and cruise through these because I know time's ticking, but these are some very specific case studies as to why permeable pavers were chosen, and provides you guys with information as to what they cost, etc. So at City Field, they had existing asphalt parking lot, and they wanted to provide additional parking space, but with a very sustainable green infrastructure mentality. They looked at it from a standard design approach, and one of the things that I mentioned very early on is when we have to control the stormwater, one of the go-tos is a storage tank, and there's an extreme expense with that design solution, in addition to the inlets, the concrete piping, etc. So there's a cost to that design. When we start eliminating that infrastructure and we start changing the way we think about these designs up front, we can eliminate all that infrastructure. So no longer do you need the drain inlets, the piping, and certainly the storage tank. So now, this is where I was mentioning the 14 inches per hour subgrade. They don't have an under drain in the 16 inch. That water is soaking up like a sponge underneath it. In this project, by eliminating that infrastructure, by changing the design, we were able to save 15% off the project design up front. This is that cross section again, 14 inches based on the vehicular application. We talked about the stones. We talked about the storage area, and this is the math behind it. So amount of square feet of paving, 14 inches of subgrade, the 40 inches of aggregate, and it created a lot more storage capacity than that original design did. So you can see the benefits of using the entire footprint of your space and how it relates to stormwater. As I mentioned, they were also able to be mechanically installed on this project, being such a vast area. So it really created an efficiency. You can see the size of what they're laying down each time. It's the top of a pallet, basically, and they just clamp it in. So that's a very useful technique in terms of dropping that cost. Oftentimes when people hear pavers, they think about gold-plated, diamond-encrusted gloves. It's an expense issue. This really drops that down. The other example is at a residential community, and they actually use the permeable pavers in the roadway, eliminating the detention pond altogether from the design, capturing all the stormwater from the roofs, etc. All that stormwater went into the roadway. A cost analysis done by the Institute of Concrete Pavers took a look at how pavers were selected versus standard concrete and standard asphalt. You can see the cost of the material, excavation. There was a little bit more money for stone. Everyone had curbs. $4 because it was mechanically installed. Maintenance. We know there's going to be a cost for maintenance in terms of permeable, whether it's a rain garden, whether it's pervious concrete, or permeable pavers. That cost is going to be a little bit skewed based on what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll talk about what that is, but 20 cents gets you a vacuum truck and refilling those joints. I think everyone's lying if they say that there's no maintenance in asphalt. You know, it's whether it's resealed, it's just how often it's done, or you're replacing it. And there's certainly maintenance to concrete. It's not as often as asphalt, but there certainly is maintenance. The key here is these slides down here, or these line items, eliminating the detention pond altogether, ultimately being about 11,000 square foot. That's all in. So that was in 2007. The local example, and this is based on pervious cover. This is where this opportunity for permeable pavers came from. Okay? The building footprint and part of this design led them to take a look at the restrictions based on Mount Lebanon. They had to calculate the amount of pervious area versus impermeable. And ultimately they went with our Eco-Opulent because it could be mechanically installed because of the code where it had to be 3/8 of an inch and ultimately providing them the pervious cover area. So this was installed a couple of years ago. This is that Eco-Opulent product. You can kind of see the L shape just totally disappears in the overall pattern. This is kind of what I meant by not being limited to just a rectangle. If you remember from the plan, sorry, this is that area right here where they're installing right now. Very curvy, very narrow. That sidewalk is only 8 feet wide, and they're still, mostly because it's there, they're installing it via the machine. So it created an opportunity of efficiency. This is just some images showing how a tree with a drop tree grate was placed into the system. You can see the pit itself, they put a metal grate over it, and then ultimately the pavers kind of conceal the whole installation. The benefit of this is these trees are going to soak up a large amount of that water. It's going to thrive. It's going to allocate that water in a different way compared to a standard parking lot tree, right? We've seen that.